let's cover this story, Sarah, that I know this is going to be making the rounds, and maybe it's been overshadowed a little bit by the whole sort of SSPX drama, but this is a scandal. It's an outright scandal here, and this was announced by, again, New Ways Ministry, who some of you might already know by name as a very controversial, scandalous group here within the Catholic Church in some way. And the principal celebrant was a priest, but present was Cardinal Timothy Radcliffe, and he gave the homily at this Mass, which, again, was technically this Mass of, quote, thanksgiving for 50 years of friendship, partnership, and commitment in the pursuit of justice. It's essentially, in all but name, a Mass, quote-unquote, celebrating this gay couple's 50th anniversary. So really, really horribly scandalous situation. It is a true scandal. And there's a similar observation that I was thinking, but this commentator on Twitter put it into better wording. And he said that, like Father Martin, and I agree with this analysis of Father Martin as well, like Father Martin, Cardinal Radcliffe played the usual game. Don't say anything that can definitively be used to nail you. Do everything to give the impression that you're endorsing gay marriage without crossing that increasingly faint line. It's disingenuous and deliberate. Now, I can't say that I can judge Cardinal Radcliffe's heart in this matter, but I can certainly judge the appearance of what happened here, and it's truly scandalous, and we need to pray for a correction to this continuing scandals, continuing series of events scandalous like this in the church.
Right, and I don't want to undersell or ignore the fact that things like the schism that just recently took place, it becomes very confusing for people when you don't have the equality of clarity coming from the Vatican.
Sure.
And so I really am hoping that in the coming days, months, and years, that the current pontificate will lean more towards clarity, towards not just that particular group, but towards all of these different miniature scandals that are taking place around the country, around the world. You look at Germany doing their lay preaching, even though they were told not to. Things like this, that I think we do need to have actually a more aggressive approach from the Vatican. Because, we've talked about it over the past few months, that you keep having the Vatican's response to the Synodal Way, to these German bishops, and so on, has actually been good with what they've said.
Yes.
But then the question has to be, okay, what happens when they continue, even though they're ignoring and violating what not only the Vatican is saying, but they don't even have to say, or shouldn't have to say, but the entire tradition of the Church.
And I want to say that this commentator at Pluant on X further has a good analysis here and a good suggestion. And he says his advice is having many people write balanced, concise complaints to Rome, emphasizing how anyone with 2 functioning brain cells knows what's being tacitly suggested here, but focus on scandal. And that if you go ranting about that heretical and modernist, it's imprecise, which is true, and it's going to be ineffectual. Yes, especially because it's imprecise. The big point is to say this is scandalous and it can lead people astray. This is why it needs to be corrected, even if, again, technically the cardinal didn't break the laws, by definition. But go ahead, yes.
I think he may have, at least not the cardinal, but the priest involved.
There you go.
So if you scroll down this particular article at New Ways Ministry, you can see Father O'Keefe there, who is blessing what appears to be the union of these 2 gay men, and it's doing so in a formal way at the conclusion of the so-called Mass of Thanksgiving. So this would be the sort of thing that, at least in my opinion, was covered recently by the dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith in regards to whether or not you can do these sort of gay blessings that, say, Germany wanted to do. And they were told, no, and that's not what fiducia supplicans means. And instead, I think we do kind of see this, in my opinion, fiducia supplicans was a document that should never have been released anyway.
Yes.
And that just simply sowed confusion. But in any event, since the Leo pontificate outwardly, and the Francis Pontificate behind the scenes attempted to sort of roll some of that back. There's really no basis for what you see being pictured as to this blessing of union at the end of a Thanksgiving Mass for their union.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So it's certainly breaking what has been expressed as the spirit of the law there. So, and we must emphasize that when Fiducia Supplicans came out, it was considered so scandalous that there was I believe it was I'm blanking out on which of the Eastern churches broke off ecumenical dialogue with Rome over the issue. They said, look, it looks like you're trying to approve gay unions here. And they, again, back in May, reopened ecumenical dialogue with Rome because as they announced, they were assured by Pope Leo, no, there's no question of this ever happening. And that's not what the document was supposed to be. But the fact remains that the impression given is scandalous. The impression given is that there's this opening up, and that's how certain people who want that are pushing the issue. So, yes, I really appreciate this advice here, especially the advice about don't turn this into your opportunity to write to your bishop or write to Rome where you're ranting about heresy and modernism and so on and so forth. Take a breath, calm down, pray about it, and deal with it in a way that says this can lead souls astray by causing scandal. Don't focus on how it broke this aspect of the law here, it broke that aspect of the law. The intention is visible. That's the scandalous part, and say we need clarity on this. Can we please get clarity on this? That's the way to express it in a letter in some way. Don't go posting about it on social media, bragging about how you wrote the letter. Focus on prayerfully addressing it to the correct authorities. And it's difficult when you've got this cardinal who's doing it, because he's there's such a prince of the church as a cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church. But there, in this case, you have to go to Rome for it. But still,
and the reason that we're focusing so much on the scandal aspect, just for those who hadn't read this yet, if you read the homily of Cardinal Radcliffe in this, he doesn't mention the nature of their relationship.
Yep.
Instead, he repeatedly uses the term friendship. It's all 50 years of friendship over and over again. And so that's why, he's being very, forgive me, Father McTagg, but very Jesuitical. And some of the ways that he's sort of avoiding any direct statement here. Yeah. But yet, because he's doing this in the context of a mass, which is acknowledging this romantic, I suppose, relationship between two men, that's what, no matter what, will lead to scandal. And of course, they've got the rainbow stole on as well. But
well, what this is kind of a great example, a great jumping off point for how to deal with any kind of scandal like this in the church. And part of the issue is that these things hurt people's faith and trust in the church. It hurts people's faith and trust in the institution. And this is going to be an imperfect analogy, I'm sure, but you can compare it to a marriage where it at least feels like the spouse is abusive or neglectful or whatever issue you want to have here. That still doesn't change the nature of the marriage. If it was a valid marriage, the marriage is still a marriage, and issues within it are not going to change that fact. Similarly, issues within the church don't change the fact that it's still the church. We're still called to be subject to it. We are still called to be in union with it. And we're still called to love it. We're still called to love Cardinal Radcliffe and honor him as a cardinal. Believe it or not, yes, we are, as difficult as that is. And that's part of bearing the cross of being a Catholic and dealing with these things. But there are good ways to address it, to speak up, to write about it, but do so in a prayerful way. Do so in a way that does not separate yourself from the Catholic Church, in a way that is not schismatic on your part, because as you can see, the people in the church who are trying to cause these issues, who are striving for error, who are striving for sin in this way, they're sneaky about it. They're smart about it. They are wise as serpents about it. Our Lord tells us we have to be wise as serpents in addition to being as innocent as doves. So you need to make sure that you are praying and getting past this emotional scandalization in yourself. Your duty is to get beyond that and approach it properly. Again, prayer first and foremost, and then how do you do an action that is wise and prudent and smart and can maybe have more of an effect than if you just lose your temper.
But I do want to rewind to one thing that you said that I think could be sort of misinterpreted a little bit, because I've had this conversation before with people when I've talked about, loving your enemies or loving the person who persecutes you, or loving a person in the church, like you were talking about with Cardinal Radcliffe and how we're called to do that. I think that one of the things that becomes confusing and difficult for people is because they don't understand what we mean by love.
Yes, absolutely.
And so they think it kind of means that you have to maybe have some kind of obedience to the thing that is actually counter to what the church is saying, or that you actually have to like what they're doing, which also isn't the case. Because remember, to love someone is to want the best for them, right? It is to want the highest good for them, actually. And the highest good for them is actually their conversion and their closeness to our Lord.
Yes.
Right? That's the highest good for anyone. And so because of that, it can actually be that, that loving them entails a type of correction.
Yes.
And,
well,
maybe you can't do that directly, but you can do that, through the church, through the body that is designed to set that up. So, just a little bit of thing, we don't always break that down as to what we mean by that. And I just kind of want to, given the sensitive nature of everything that's happening here, make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Because again, the cardinal's authority is higher than yours. You're not called to correct him in that manner, as if you are above him. But you can absolutely, again, maybe you want to write to Cardinal Radcliffe directly. Maybe you have perfectly discerned that you know how to say this to him in a way that maybe could get through to his heart.
Sienna moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Do that. But do that in a letter to him that is private and expressing this as, maybe you're in, maybe you have a relationship with him. Maybe you've served under him or something like that. It's the same way to deal with your parish priest. You don't go screaming at him because he's going to write you off right away. But you can correct him in a proper way. You can offer this explanation of the problem. You never know whose heart you're going to touch by doing that. And I am reminded also when it comes to how to approach things that feel unjust. I was recently reading about the suppression of the Jesuits back in the day, the original suppression of the Jesuits, which at that time, that was an injustice. These were liberal efforts to try and suppress this group that was deeply loyal to the Pope and educating people in the faith and doing great work. And the Pope put forth this decree suppressing the Jesuits, disbanding them. And St. Alphonsus Liguori at the time was deeply concerned about this. He was deeply hurt that this was going to happen. But when he received the brief from the Pope that said this, you could see the difficulty on his face, but he received it, prayed silently. This is what the account of his life says. He received this brief, he prayed silently, and then he said, "The will of the Pope is the will of God." And he put it down and went back to his other work. And similarly, the head of the Jesuits in Russia wrote a letter to not Saint Catherine, goodness gracious, but the Tsaress, Catherine of Russia, Catherine of the Great, quote unquote, of Russia. She was the ruler of Russia, and the Jesuits, the head of the Jesuits in Russia, wrote a letter to her, begging her to release this brief that the Pope had put out, because what she did is she refused to have it published. She didn't want the Jesuits disbanded for her own political reasons. She wanted them to continue to exist. And she refused to publish the letter the Pope sent that disbanded the Jesuits. And the head of the Jesuits wrote her, expressing their loyalty to her as the ruler of their country, and begging her to release the brief that resulted in their own suppression so that they could express their obedience to the Holy Father. Imagine that. I was shocked when I read that as an example. But when
it's the
it comes
example of the saints, though.
Yes, it is the example of the saints.
Yeah,
but again,
like all of them.
As you mentioned, St. Catherine of Siena, she wrote to the Pope saying, "Holy Father," and she called him in the sweetest, most respectful terms, but she said, "Staying in Avignon is causing great scandal and harm to the faithful. Please come back to Rome." She wrote that in her letters to him while urging others to remember that they are called to obey the hierarchy of the church. So it's a hard line to walk. It's a difficult line to walk, but as Catholics, we're called to walk it.